Hey folks, welcome to Snowball Podcast. Our guest today is Jim Spignardo. Jim is the Director of Cloud Strategy and AI Enablement at ProArch. With over 25 years in IT, Jim's journey spans network engineering, cloud management, cybersecurity, and strategic consulting. Jim, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here.
I'm going to socialize the topic to our audience in just a bit, but before I do that, if you could just give a brief intro about yourself, sort of what you do, and then we can hit the
Sure.
ground
Yeah,
running.
absolutely. So as you mentioned, I've been in the industry for about 25 years. Most of that has been around the Microsoft technologies and solutions. I began in earnest a career as a Microsoft certified trainer for about 9 years, working for a New Horizons Computer Learning Training Center in upstate New York. And that really was an eye opener because I had to learn a lot of technologies at a depth that most folks don't typically have to know them that know the material. And to a degree, you probably don't need to know the material. But I then transitioned to IT healthcare for about 6 years, working for a medical system, also in upstate New York, about a 4,000 user uh, hospital system, and that gave me some really great exposure to enterprise systems. I was their lead Microsoft engineer. And around 2017 is when I picked up with ProArch. At the time, we were known as IV4, letter I, letter V, number 4. We were acquired by ProArch during the pandemic. And in that capacity, I've really worked as a consultant for many, many years. Did spend some time managing teams as well, so I have some experience there. And just recently, given the nature of where technology is today, our CEO had asked me to take on a role of Director of Cloud Strategy and AI Enablement, which is really kind of an interesting, exciting new role, both for our organization, but for myself as well. So,
Lovely. Thank you for the introduction.
sure.
A lot of our conversation is going to be around the last part of what you mentioned there, what you're doing actively for obvious reasons. Everybody is curious about what's happening in the tech world currently, and the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months and whatnot. And each of us is doing what we can to sort of build software slightly or very dramatically differently from how we've kind of done in the past, right?
Sure.
Same
Yeah.
thing here
Absolutely.
for us at Snowpal as well. Trying to explore what's out there and what makes sense, so you could sort of incorporate these changes into the mix into your ecosystem slowly but surely, right? That way you're
Yeah.
not shaking the foundation more than you have to, and you can sort of keep chugging along. Perfect. So the topic we have, and you mentioned before, you mentioned upstate New York. I used to have family in like Albany and Troy. Like which part
Sure.
of upstate New
Yep.
York?
Yeah, I actually did my undergraduate degree at this University at Albany, so I know
Oh,
that
okay,
area.
cool.
I'm very fond of that area, and hoping someday maybe I'll move back to that space. So yeah, I'm actually west of that, so in the Syracuse, New York area, which is commonly referred to as Central New York
Oh,
to
lovely.
folks. Yeah, which is probably not a term most people have heard, but
Super. Okay, the topic. Let's start with one of the first items we have in the list of what we
sure.
hopefully can talk about today, which is AI adoption isn't just for tech giants.
Hmm.
So, what you mentioned here is how organizations of different sizes can strategically implement AI. So, let's talk a little bit about that. You mentioned you transitioned to a newer role not too long ago, and you mentioned you're the director of AI enablement. So, I think that actually isn't a bad place to start. So, can you tell us a little bit about what how smaller or mid-sized organizations should adopt AI and these technologies compared to the larger, probably the tech giants out there?
Yeah. So if you think about uh, some of the large enterprise organizations, they're very stratified. They have very specific roles. They're very siloed in what they do. They usually have very well developed processes and procedures. Not that they can't benefit from AI, and many of them are. If you look at, for instance, what Walmart's doing, and they have kind of create this super agent to help all aspects of their business. So if you're a small business owner, you're reading something like that, you can kind of get intimidated and say, I don't think we could ever do anything like that. They've probably spent millions When the reality is, we've created a democratization of AI with the advent of ChatGPT and all of the other variant flavors that exist out there. So for small and medium-sized businesses, although they don't have the same size, they still have some of the same challenges and same pain points. And in a lot of cases, they're more resource constrained than a larger organization. So if they can kind of identify what those pain points and business challenges are, and if they understand enough about AI to be able to then develop use cases, for them, it's actually probably a even bigger win as far as what they're able to gain. The probably the biggest challenge for them though is where do they get started? How do they kind of solidify or come or figure out what their strategy is going to be to go forward? And that's where sometimes paralyzation sets in. And there's almost too much information coming at them sometimes to really kind of decide, well, what's the path forward? And ProArch, that's kind of what we do. We sit down with companies and we evaluate and we ask smart business questions about what you're trying to do, where your pain points exist in your organization, and then we kind of start at the user level, right? How do we improve user productivity? The things that we do every single day, whether it's drafting emails, whether it's taking notes during calls, whether it's having to produce proposals or respond to RFPs or try and hire individuals. Those organizations don't necessarily have what I quote unquote experts in all these areas. But with generative AI, they can kind of have an expert in their pocket. Or with Copilot, there's an assistant there that's able to help them, that has expertise that probably outstrips most of the people that work in that organization. So it's a very interesting time to live in.
There's a number of things you mentioned there. A few things let me ask you there. A recent MIT report, I think not from too long ago, I'm sure you might have seen this as well, said that 95% of AI pilots fail, right? And
Yep,
there was
I've read
there's some
I've read
buzz
that.
around it. So I have in the context of what you just mentioned, I just want to get your thoughts on it, and I have a couple of follow up questions there.
Sure.
Why? I mean, do you believe that? I mean, sometimes these reports, it's not like they're false or falsified. It's just
Yep.
that you have to take them with a grain of salt. If they say it failed, why did it fail, or what do they mean by failure?
Right.
What is the definition of failure? So, what are your takeaways from that report?
Yeah, and I've seen that going around quite a bit, and I don't think that helps the case, right? It helps these small businesses, and I totally agree with you. I think you do have to take a grain of salt with that. I just put together an article today that I'm going to be putting out on LinkedIn soon, in the fact that all of this reporting on 95% of these initiatives fail. The lens of these, and they're usually bigger outlets that are reporting on this, are typically probably looking at very large investment projects, right? They're not looking at the transformational things that are happening at the day to day in the individual level. So I actually argue in this article that if you could measure shadow AI, the things that everybody's using on a daily basis to help them improve what they're doing, whether it's they're using Gemini or Claude or whatever to create that report for their boss, or those are things that are hard to measure. And I do believe that's kind of where there's a tremendous amount of value and return on investment that's not being measured properly. I also think that in a lot of cases, those articles aren't coming down to the smaller and medium-sized businesses to really poll them as far as what's working and what's not working. At the same time, I do think there are a lot of ambitious and maybe overzealous efforts that go out there and think they're going to, solve all the world problems tomorrow, and then realize we didn't have a plan, we didn't have a strategy, and we shot for the moon when we should have shot, somewhere in between to really kind of find our footing first.
So, Jim, what you mentioned there is, let's dissect that a little bit. You
Yep.
mentioned, the way these reports work is, and correct me if I'm wrong, how they measure the success or failure of these projects. You mentioned, say, Copilot or other tools that you could be using as a developer, like Claude, for instance, for generating code and whatnot, that makes you more productive as a developer, as somebody
Yep.
who's contributing to that organization. I mean, the way I interpreted the article was, when they say AI pilots fail, it's less about me using AI tools to better myself, because that there isn't a whole lot of investment necessarily, right? It just depends on
Right.
your organization, but it's $20. I'm paying for GitHub Copilot, so it's all
Hmm.
right. The way I interpreted this article was, when they say AI pilots, it means what is a significant enough spend that goes on where you're redoing something
Yep.
that you may have already done, or
Right.
you're perhaps picking up a new project if you're a consulting organization or an agency, or if you're a product company building something new entirely using these tools. So you're actually solving problems, one, very differently from you may have solved in the past using
Right.
these AI tools, or you're building solutions that could not have otherwise been done. In other words, if I did not have these LLMs and all of everything that's associated with AI today, I really couldn't even build it, right? To me, that's what I see as an AI pilot. I mean, what are your
Mhm.
thoughts?
No, I agree. I agree completely. I think I was also reading another article today that was saying something along the lines of, you can't expect AI to fix a broken culture, broken process, right? If you just try and apply AI without actually coming at it with a clear head and a clear approach to it, you're probably not going to see the results you're expecting. So it can't fix it necessarily can't fix the broken things, right? You need to fix the culture and the way you actually get work done, and then it's an enhancer, it's an enabler, it's a force multiplier to what you're doing well, right? At the same time, it can most likely be a force multiplier to the things you're doing poorly, and
Right.
so that's not people don't always understand that, right? And I've seen this even with our own uh, teams internally, because that's part of my role as well, is to drive adoption within our own company as well as with our customers. That someone will come back and, well, it didn't work, and you try and figure out what the approach they were taking, and it was very much, well, AI is supposed to be able to read your mind and be able to format things in a way that you didn't tell it you wanted it formatted, and you didn't provide any context. And so, just like having the appropriate skills for the role you're in, AI cannot replace that yet. You still need to bring the skills that you have, and the more skilled you are in the field or position you're in, the better off you're going to be using these tools. That's been my experience.
Fair enough. Right. I'm going to share, to ask my next part of my question, I'm going to share this diagram this
Sure.
image, I should say,
Yeah.
that you may have actually seen. Am I sharing my screen? Yeah.
Yep. I
Have you
see it.
seen this one, Jim, where, this is from years ago, where what the customer described, what got budgeted? I am
Yep.
sharing my screen,
Yep.
right?
Yep. I can see it.
And then finally, it's a
Oh yeah.
funny, it's a humorous thing where what the customer actually wanted was quite different, right?
Yep.
I mean, this is one of the things it always resonated with me, because even when you're building something for a client, the client, 9 out of 10 times, maybe they're sure as to what they want, or sometimes they're not, or our interpretation of the needs could be different.
Sure. Yeah.
So, long story short, you end up building something differently. This is in a world, let me stop sharing that. This is in a world where AI wasn't necessarily in the picture, right? Where you're
Right.
just building, say, a user interface, or building an
Yeah.
API, or whatever it is you're building, that people have done plenty of times over the years.
Yep.
If some part of the diagram is true, as funny as it is, how do you see that happen in the world of AI, where the client's not exactly sure, because it's a moving platform, right?
Yep.
Not everybody knows exactly what they're looking for, because one of the things you mentioned was, identifying pain points and improving user productivity. My question relates to that, because, when you ask somebody what their pain points are, sure, they might come up with a set of pain points, but the concern and the question I really have in the context of this diagram is, you might have some pain points, but those may not cost you a lot of money to doing them poorly.
Right.
Whereas what you don't recognize as a pain point necessarily might actually be areas where you're wasting a lot of time and money, right? So what somebody tells me as a pain point I still have to take it with a grain of salt. So
Sure.
how do you maneuver in a world where the client or the people asking you what they want to get done, they're not exactly certain because AI is new enough to a lot of
Yep.
us, and the
Yep.
implementer is also in those early stages. So how do we ensure that there is not much or not so much of a communication gap
Great.
because we are in these early stages of AI
Yeah.
enablement?
I think the first part is you have to ask really good business questions, right? You have to really kind of try and get behind what they're saying to understand what it is they're trying to get at. That's not easy, right? That takes years and years and years of consultative practice. The other part is, you know, let's assume they come to you and they seem like they clearly understand what they were trying to accomplish and where the pain point is, and they want to go after it, with all the gusto in the world. Uh, you need to stop them and kind of say, okay, let's understand what you deem as the impact if we were to solve this problem, right? Can you put it in numbers? Can you put it in time? Can you show me how you're planning on measuring what the return here would be for being able to solve for this problem? And kind of compare that against what the effort would be. And that's a lot of times we'll actually stop some organizations in their tracks and say, well, geez, I guess it's not worth trying to go after, right? That's something maybe we just teach people how to prompt better, and they feed it into their daily workflow. Whereas to your point, right, there may be something larger that needs to be addressed that they're not even aware of, that you can bring to their attention. So we see this all the time around data. The data is a big issue, and a lot of organizations, they will struggle for decades with bad data and the inability to make good business decisions because they have poor data. And they just want to ask a quick question with Copilot or ChatGPT or something and get answers. When in reality, what they need is a data platform that sanitizes their data, rationalizes their data, and can provide them really strong business intelligence. And then, and only then, can we come back in and say, let's apply AI to that to be able to really bring additional strength and power to it. So there's been plenty of times as an organization, ProArch is said to a potential customer or customer, this is not where you need to start, right? We're starting, you're putting the cart before the horse. We actually should go back and address data governance, data structure, good data practices before we start to go down the path. Because ultimately, you're just throwing good money after bad, and really what you need is a common data platform to be able to extract all the information you need to make really good informed business decisions.
Okay. Should we try, put whatever you just mentioned there, Jim, the next 5 to 10 minutes, should we take an example and see how that initial conversations would look like? Sort of
Yeah.
hands on at that level, if you
Yeah.
know what I mean, right? So I'm going to share my screen here and take a real life use case, right? This is not manufactured. So I'm
Okay.
going to share my screen here. Okay, you see my screen there, right?
Yep.
I'm just going to take one of our. So we are a startup based out of the suburbs of Washington D.C. and we do a few different things. One of the things we do is build APIs, right? We create
Mhm.
APIs, publish them on AWS Marketplace, and anyone else who's building software can consume these APIs, so they don't have to redo what has already been done and then start chugging along from there.
Yep.
That's just a high level synopsis. So this is just one of our products, but just I want to ask a real question here. If let's say I'm like, you know what, Jim, we built this, we built it a year ago, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. There's APIs, is like 8 different APIs with thousands of endpoints. People can use it to build whatever it is that they want to be able to build. Now, when we talk about AI enablement, one of the things we are actually looking at right now, right? So this is not manufactured by any stretch of the imagination. We are genuinely looking at, not as we look into adding more APIs into our ecosystem, we're also exploring avenues to improve our existing APIs in the context of what is available to be done today using AI tools and technologies. So
Right.
let's say this is my initial conversation I'm having with Jim, with ProArch, with companies of that nature, of that kind who are in that business. What would that initial conversation look like? Because the pain point I have to be creative in coming up with pain points to some extent, because these are complete to a large extent. These APIs, they do what they promise to do.
Mhm.
So maybe there is a pain point. I'm sure there is if we look hard enough, but that may or may not be the natural starting point, in my opinion. I could be wrong there. But what do you think? How do you think this conversation should get started if this was sort of the problem domain? And this is not a manufactured problem, I promise.
Sure. The maybe restate the problem statement here for me.
Sure. So when we built one of our first products, right, Jim, basically we built a project management platform, and we went live about 4 years ago or so.
Hmm.
We built this tool. It's a full blown project management app. You could do whatever it
Sure.
is you do with other tools, you can do it with ours as well. Uh, what took us more of our time was building the backend systems, right? The UI,
Sure.
there's a lot of features, but the relative time that it took us more to build the backend systems. So when we talk to other founders, small companies, mid-sized companies, solopreneurs, dual entrepreneurs, whatnot, we recognize that they also had similar problems where they had only so much money or time and they could not do all of it. So we
Hmm.
decided to re-provision our private APIs, and then we made them public. So if you have to build a system today and you need access control, you don't need to worry about designing access control. You could just go to our access control API,
Right.
and whatever your needs are, you could implement your needs using our API. Either you license it or you buy an API key on AWS Marketplace, right? So a very conventional way of building software.
Sure.
But fast forward to today in 2025, there's a number of different ways you could slice and dice this. So I just took this as an example. It doesn't have to be that, but I'm just trying to explore how those initial conversations would look like for companies that want to go in the direction of enabling AI, and they're engaging with organizations such as yourself.
Yeah. So I think the first thing you need to understand is where's the data, right? What type of data are we talking about, and what do you intend to do with that data, right? So, when a lot of companies start down this journey, they assume that they'll just be able to connect into any data source anywhere and just use whatever tool and be able to start interrogating that data to get responses out of it. And it's usually not as straightforward as that. ProArch's a very big proponent of data platforms, and essentially kind of creating centralized data platforms where you're bringing all the various data sets from your line of business applications into a central, in this case, a lake house or Fabric or whatever, and then essentially using a common strategy to format that data, to organize that data, and then connecting your intelligence to the back end of that. So whether it's Copilot connectors or Power BI or whatever else may be, because now you have all of the data that you're interested in. And again, you got to remember too, not all data from all systems is going to be stuff that you want to use AI with, right? So you necessarily want to be replicating or synchronizing data that doesn't really have much value. We're actually going through this a similar process right now ourselves internally, and that's where you can start to see some tremendous value, not only from the standpoint of using AI, but also other purposes like business intelligence. So there's kind of a dual purpose there, but that's I would start with where's your data and what are you looking to do with it, and then understanding what would be beneficial to the organization to be able to interrogate those data sets using something like AI. But having
Okay.
it in a centralized location kind of takes away the need to keep re-architecting or rebuilding solutions all over the place. We're trying to avoid that as an organization. There's certainly always going to be some benefits for some built-in third-party solutions that are embedded in that particular application that you can't get away from. But we're looking to try and create a common platform that essentially allows you to use AI tools against any data anywhere, right? And not have to kind of be beholden to another recurring service fee that lives inside this application or that application or this application.
Okay. So see if you're building greenfield projects, right? When we build a new API, for instance, uh, nothing is easy. But in my opinion, when you're building something new from ground up, like say our ninth API that we're working on, which is in the fintech space,
Yep.
coming up with an architecture that uses the current tools from the AI suite is a little bit easier, I've seen personally, than making changes to existing systems. Because you
Right.
don't want to, when you're trying to shake the foundation, you want to make sure things continue to work. You don't want to break what's not broken, but at the same
Right.
time, you want to continually improve that. So
Yep.
how do you approach, like, when you, let's say you're working with a client, uh, and it's not a greenfield project. Let's say they have a production system, and if you took our production system, Jim, we have dependencies on AWS. We use different services on AWS. We use
Yep.
Mongo and other databases. We use Salesforce and Heroku. So there's a number of different pieces in that puzzle. How do you figure which ones you're going to sort of play with first to make improvements or do the AI enablement on? Because I reckon you're not going to say, what, let's change everything, because nobody's going to want to do that.
No.
Probably people don't have the budget to do that, and the risk is just way too high. So, how do you identify areas within the existing architecture and the components that somebody has in production to figure, hey, here's where I want to take my initial stab at for X, Y, and Z reasons? How do you make those judgments?
Yeah, I think it's a matter of understanding, where is the low hanging fruit from a use case perspective, and saying, okay, if we could find a use case that has low impact but high value, that's something to kind of use as a pilot case, and then also think about, are there wherever your data resides today, assuming that you're not extracting it and moving it to another kind of centralized data repository, are there tools or connectors that would make it simple for you to essentially attach to those, right? If you're using a SQL backend or you're, whatever the case may be, where there's established tool sets already that can attach to those data sources to be able to get to them using AI, right? Versus having to architect something completely new and embed AI into your solution, since it's not greenfield, right? From the perspective of building from the ground up, and I think you would probably agree, you got to start at this point. Anything you're building should have AI uh, in the requirements right from the get go. But to your point, yeah, if it's something that's existed for a long time and you want to be very careful about not introducing any risk to that application, I would start with something simple that is easy to connect to and easy to show and prove value for.
Okay, so when you try to identify those pain points or propose recommendations to existing architecture in a non-greenfield project, how do you go about doing that? What kind of tools do you use to help your teams generally find out, hey, here's what the customer is doing, here's how things have been working, but we see that they could be doing this better. How do you quantify that, and what are the tools that you typically use to help you and your teams identify those problems quicker?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to sound funny, but one of the biggest tools you use is conversations, right? It's about having them show you what they're doing, and all the tools in the world are great as far as kind of being able to examine systems, but when it comes down to it, that's never going to replace a conversation with either a development team or the product group team to understand, how they use it, and how they interface with it and how they interact with it. Yeah, so I mean, that's kind of where I would start, believe it or not.
Okay. And how do you see the team composition change? Like if you did, let's say you took a project that you worked on, for instance, a year ago, prior to the AI enablement phase of what you're doing right now,
Yep.
compared to what you do, like if you could walk us through a typical team structure, right? What were the roles in that team 6 months or a year ago, and how do you see that be completely, or how different is it today for the exact same type of problems?
Yeah, and I guess it depends on how advanced folks want to get, but uh, organizations definitely need to have someone within the group that has expertise, right? I don't know for a lot of small shops, there's necessarily any person who's dedicated to that role today, right? But there's going to be someone who's wearing multiple hats, who's going to be potentially um, uh, coding, but also having to understand the ins and outs of the AI technology as well. Um, at the same time, the folks that are leading that project need to be conversant and knowledgeable of these technologies as well, because they are accountable uh, in the end to the outputs of these projects. So it's important that they understand and can speak the languages as well. As time goes on, and certainly with larger organizations, there are definitely dedicated roles within these teams now, where you have someone who is specifically trained and experienced on AI, that's their role within those teams. And I think as time goes on, you're definitely going to see that for smaller organizations that can't necessarily bring that talent, they're going to probably outsource that talent and bring it in, which makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense to if you don't have that, don't just try and fumble your way through it. Reach out and get some outsourced expertise to help you on those projects.
Okay, so are there any new roles? What would be the titles of those new roles that didn't exist like a year ago that you
Yeah,
see have become a core part of these teams when you're trying to, build something for a client or for yourself as a company?
sure. There's definitely I don't know if there's necessarily new roles per se. It's kind of roles that have extended, right? So if a data analyst, it's going to be someone like a data analyst that has some AI designation. And I say that with and understanding that my specific title is new, right? So, but mine's more of a business role, right? It's not a there's some technical level to it, but there are definitely going to be. Here's a good example. We in the last 5 years made a commitment and an investment in our cloud and infrastructure group to make sure we had automation engineers, folks that would bring automation into the infrastructure space to ensure that we were being able to do things in infrastructure as code and a repeatable process. So as it stands today, there will probably be something akin to an automation engineer, but there'll be an AI engineer that's going to not only we could probably work side by side with that automation engineer and look for ways to embed AI into the process from the jump, right? And say, okay, where do we find there are opportunities within this specific initiative, service, solution, whatever it is, to essentially ingrain AI into this product. So,
Okay. So I asked you earlier about the composition of teams and how they've changed, but let's say now I want to ask you about the size of these teams.
sure.
What were the typical sizes of these teams when you engaged let's say you take a project and assuming ceteris paribus conditions, how do you see the size of those teams as having changed today? How, I presume it's smaller, but how much smaller is it?
I don't know if it is smaller, but quite honestly, I think in a lot of ways, it, there's because the expectations are greater. I don't know if we've adjusted to making these projects that smaller. Now, what I will say is from a development standpoint, and that's not my expertise, but from a development standpoint, certainly when it comes to things like using AI to assist in coding, there's definitely been a reduction in the amount of individuals you'll need on a team to be able to support those things because of the fact that you have such an ability to extend and enhance the capabilities of that team. So, as far as the number of team members you might need on some sort of development project, I could definitely see that. I don't know. I haven't read enough statistics on this, but in the next 2 to 5 years, 25 to 30% less effort needed That's it.
I
With that
actually
said,
had
though,
a,
go ahead.
Jim, I had somebody tell me in my podcast, I think it was based out of Australia, if I'm not wrong. We had
Hmm.
a team of about 46, 47 people, if memory serves me right. That was from about 6 months ago. And I
Yep.
asked him how many people there are in the team today. He said about 8 people,
Wow.
right? So
That's
my first
incredible.
question was, natural question was, were you overstaffed to begin with, right? Because if you're
Right.
going from like 48 to 8, that's a natural question to ask. I don't exactly remember what his answer was, but it was to the effect of he didn't believe they were overstaffed, but they are able to get it done. So which means that's like a 60, maybe 75%
Yeah.
reduction.
Yep.
Those numbers can vary. You again have to try taking all of these things with a grain of salt. But if you have to put a number in the next 6 to 12 to 18 to 24 months, what do you believe that would be? Would it be 10% fewer people? Would it be 50% fewer people? Would it be 80% fewer people?
I guess it kind of really depends on what we're talking about from a perspective of specific roles, right? I think if you look at things that are extremely data entry or manual, repetitive types of tasks, those types of things are at extreme risk of being eliminated or significantly downsized. In those areas, you could easily see a reduction of 75 to 80%. When it comes to things that are more deep thinking types of tasks, and again, AI can do deep thinking, but there still needs to be guided to get the output you're looking for. Um, what I think a lot of organizations are going to do is initially start to reduce their new hires, right? As they grow and expand, what they're going to find is that they're capable of doing more with the same amount. So not necessarily seeing a significant reduction, but less of a growth, right? So over time, they're not increasing headcount as fast as they were in the past because of the fact that these technologies have been able to give them such an advantage. There will always be these companies, and your example with this Australian development company, where they want to cut to the bone as quick as possible, right? They're going to find the fastest path from A to Z, and get as much efficiency as possible. Um, and there's no doubt that AI is going to disrupt and is already disrupting the labor market. But I think it's going to be really difficult to tell what becomes a target, what becomes something that gets enhanced by AI, and then what becomes a brand new role, right? Becomes a brand new opportunity that never existed before. And so it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. I think I read a study already. There is a net loss already, right? It's hard to deny those facts. And if you're in these fields, and you need to really take a serious look at what you do for work and what can be replaced with automation and with artificial intelligence, and then carve out where you feel that those types of tools can't yet do what you do. I'm fairly confident in the consulting space. I've read a lot of articles that say that consultants are going to be, they're going to be dinosaurs in a few years, but there still is that human interaction. There still is that need to sit down and have business conversations with folks. Now, being able to translate that into what the outputs, that's where AI starts to take over, and you potentially don't need as many people to do that type of work, but you still need people to do similar to what we're doing right here. Having conversations.
Okay, so we have about 10 minutes to go. I have a couple of more questions, and then I have
Sure.
you give you an opportunity to ask me if there's anything you want to ask. You mentioned consulting, right? So
Yep.
let's say we are a product company, but we also do consulting, just to keep the lights on. But in that capacity, I want to ask you because I know you mentioned you're a consulting organization, right?
Yep.
So let's say if prior to the advent of AI and these tools, if someone wanted to get something done and they were not an engineering or a development team, they had little options but to go find somebody that could
Yep.
help them build that stuff.
Yep.
So let's say it took 3 months, it took 6 months, 9 months, whatever the time frame was, right? Now that same company can do a lot of the work themselves, right? They can be better prepared.
Sure.
Those initial questions, in my mind, in the way I'm looking at it, the way my experience has been, it's going to be very different from the questions that this very same client would have had in the past for the same thing that we're trying to get done previously.
Yep.
So let's say, I don't know, if you're, they could be 30% done, or whatever that number is, right? Roughly, I'm just throwing a number out there,
Hmm.
which means where they want to get 100 things done, they only need to get 70 things done because they were able to get the other 30 done already.
Right.
And part of that is also they come prepared. The other 70 items that they might need help doing, they probably have some sense of what needs to happen for those things to get done.
Sure.
So they're not as much in the dark as they may have been in the past.
Yeah.
What kind of impact does that have on consulting practices? In other words, a consulting organization that made $100, is it now going to make $70, or is it now going to make $60? Because the last piece of that puzzle, Jim, in my mind, is there are now I as a client, I'm able to do more than I could do before.
Hmm.
That is vibe coding and things of that nature, meaning I don't necessarily need to know coding. And I've talked to a number of founders on the podcast here that have actually built stuff, not in production yet, but very
Right.
close, right? They've been
Sure.
prototyping and whatnot, and they've never ever written code before.
Right.
And that was impossible like a year ago, but it's possible today.
Yep.
To me, this changes the whole facet of engineering, development, architecture, consulting, engagements, pricing, fixed prices, yada, yada, yada.
Yep.
So, how do you see this pan out? Do you see consulting organizations make less money, same money, more money? And what do you think the impact's going to be?
Yeah. Again, it's hard to say. I'll rub the crystal ball a little bit here, but I think one thing we see repeatedly is the failure to be able to execute, right? So understanding how to do something or understanding the principles behind it doesn't necessarily equate to the same thing as getting it done, right?
Two different things altogether, completely.
Absolutely. And sometimes that's exactly why we're hired. It's not because the organization doesn't know what they need to do, or in some cases even knows the principles of how to do it. It's just they're not structured, and they don't have process that allows them to get out of their own way and get it done, because they need project management team oversight with expertise in this area. And it doesn't replace experience as well, right? So you could say, well, I know how to do this migration. I've looked it all up. It created an incredible plan for me. But the moment something goes wrong, they're left just scratching their head because they don't have the experience of understanding how to deal with that struggle and that challenge and that issue. So at least for the near future, I think that's where the differentiator between consultants and just leaning on AI to get these things done is going to be. But to your point, there will be some of these things that become doable for organizations that were outside of their reach in the past. You mentioned vibe coding and not needing to know code. Part of that excites me. I've done some of that myself, built calculators for clients and in interesting little apps, but not being a developer, and also going into that code, it'd be interesting to see, is it safe? Is it secure? Is it going to meet the organization's needs, if it needs to expand and grow, right? Or is it just solving the problem for you right now? Right. So those are the things you can't replace. The expertise to say, yeah, that AI got that problem solved for you. But I'll tell you what, it's not going to scale very well. It's not very secure, and it's not following good principles. So there's a difference there, and I think we have to be careful when we're using these things, and I have to remind myself constantly that you still need to put a very critical eye to what the output of these solutions are, to make sure that it meets your standards and it's achieving what it's supposed
I
to
no,
be,
totally. I
and
agree
not just
because,
kind of you know going through the motions, so to speak.
and the way I see it also, Jim, is my constant challenge for me has been with using a lot of these tools in the recent past is where am I expected to stop thinking as a
Right.
human, right? You know, you are able to make those decisions, you're able to think past the problem, but I don't want to do it sometimes because I'm like, you know what, Krish, maybe the tool can do it better than I can do it, so I don't want to do it. And
Right.
sometimes the tool actually does not do it better than how I can do it in some cases.
Right.
And my challenge has generally been trying to identify the gray area as to where I'm supposed to be, where I'm expected to stop thinking
Yep.
because the tool can actually be better than me, and
Yep.
where I'm not expected to stop thinking, right? Those are some of my
Yeah.
challenges personally.
And there's times when I feel like I'm teaching the tool, right?
Oh, no,
I'm
absolutely,
teaching
right?
it what I need to get done instead of the other way around.
The next thing I want to ask you is I don't know if your organization particularly uses outsourcing, but for the companies that are out there that do or have relied on outsourcing,
Yep.
you know, people have asked me what are some of the reasons that we would, one might consider outsourcing. There's a number of different reasons, but the only reason, it's my opinion. Again, people are going to have strong opinions on both sides. I mean, who doesn't have an opinion these days on anything, right? If you take a bottle of water,
Absolutely.
people have two very different opinions.
You
But it's
got it.
my opinion that the need for outsourcing, at least personally for me, has been from a cost standpoint, right? It's
Sure.
generally been
Yep.
that way all the time.
Hmm.
I cannot think of a scenario where we needed to find somebody to help, whether it's for us or for the client or whoever it is, that you want to get something done. And we're like, you know what? There is nobody in the US that can actually get this done. You're going
Right.
to have to go outside the borders, our borders, to get
Yep.
help
Yep.
because that skill does not exist. People have disagreed with me, but it's just my opinion that I've never run into that scenario. The only
Yeah.
times I've actually seen outsourcing play a role or a prominent role is because you want to kind of save that money because there are parts of the world where things are more affordable
Sure.
than it might be here, even within the country, right? Kansas is, the cost of
Yeah.
living in Kansas is different from
Yep.
uh, upstate New York to New York City
Yep.
to the East Coast or the West Coast, right? How do you see the impact on outsourcing? Again, I know we have only a couple of minutes, but really quick, do you believe that there is no impact, some impact, a lot of impact where you're going to be
I,
like, I don't even think I need to outsource anymore?
I think the impact is going to be fairly similar to other industries. Again, if you go back to the difference between having an AI that can um, imitate expertise versus actual expertise. And I would argue there is even going to be some potentially some boost in some level of outsourcing because there's such a lack of uh, uh, institutional knowledge around these tools, AI tools, and companies don't want to spend a fortune to get started and lift it off the ground to be able to get these things in place.
Because
So
not
I think
everybody has $200 million like
right.
Meta does to hire an AI engineer.
Exactly. And speaking from a company that is multinational and we have locations in India and UK, that has been an option that a lot of customers appreciate having the ability to do. We lesser extent we outsource too, but only on very special projects where, to your point, we need to bring in some expert on a specific CRM or ERP system, right? That we don't have in house. So I think initially there potentially could be an increase in some of this outsourcing, but over time, again, no one knows, right? No one knows how good this stuff's going to get, and how much of it's going to just be able to do all on its own. But I would assume at some point, the pendulum's going to swing back in the other direction, and that's going to start to take an impact even on the outsourcing market. But I think initially, I really do see it probably being a positive effect for companies or for outsourcing.
I have one more thing to ask you. I know, do you have a hard stop in 2 minutes, Jim?
I'm good.
Okay, could you do another 10 minutes? Would that work?
Sure.
Okay, and if you have to go, let me know and we can wrap it up,
Yeah, no
right?
problem.
The next thing I want to ask is college education. Right now,
Yeah.
I was in college 100 years ago, it feels like, but I
Me
was there
too.
for like close to eight. I think I was there in college for like 7.5 years. Now,
Okay.
did I enjoy going to college? I think so. I made a lot of friends. I had a good time. But did any of that have a direct impact on my first job on the first line of code I wrote? I would be lying if I said that, right?
Yeah.
It actually made
Yep.
almost no difference whatsoever, to the
Sure.
point that I started to think differently about college education. And again, it's also cultural. Growing up in India, everybody who stepped out, I come from the southern part of India,
Mhm.
a state that has more engineering colleges than every other state in India, if I'm not wrong. And
Right.
you step out of the house, everybody's an engineer. So nobody respects you as an engineer because everybody's an engineer.
Right.
It's
Right.
just like people are like, okay, who cares? What else do you do, right?
Right.
Engineering is something everybody did.
Yep.
Uh, I grew up that way, but we did what we were expected to do, right? Just culturally. And I did a podcast not too long ago where I talked about, if somebody were to enroll in college today in 2025,
Yep.
I might actually discourage them from doing so for n number of reasons. It might be hypocritical because when you're in college for 7.5 years and you tell people not to go to college, it'll be like, what the heck are you talking about?
Yeah.
But things
Right.
have changed, times have changed.
Yeah.
What is your take on colleges, what they're teaching, the usefulness of those education of
Sure.
what you're learning, and the cost of education? Because America is
Yeah.
not the cheapest place to go to college, right? I mean, it's not
No,
like Europe or in Asia where you
not at
borrow
all.
like $100,000 and go to college and you're stuck there for 4 years. You get out in 2029. Your neighbor who never went to college knows to use all of these tools a whole lot better than you do. And
Yep.
now you're sitting there paying these loans while they're actually making money. And that's
Yeah.
my take, right? Very
Yeah.
what is
Yeah.
your take on it?
Yeah. I actually have some pretty strong opinions on this. Being a father of my youngest, who is a sophomore in college right now, and my oldest that graduated from Pace University in Manhattan, um, and having been through 4 years of schooling myself, which had nothing to do with the field that I'm in today, I do think that there needs to be a reckoning in the United States as far as what higher education offers and the value it provides to the workforce. Um, One thing I really truly love about IT is you can really come to this industry from so many different backgrounds. It is probably the most egalitarian industry out there. I've worked with people who only had high school degrees, who are senior network engineers at some very large network hospital systems, who never stepped a foot inside of a college. At, at the same time, there are folks that have gone on to PhD level uh, education. If you're really doing the very deep stuff with AI, I would suspect that you still need that type of education. If you're being hired by the Metas and the Open AIs to be working on these large language models and the math and the algorithms that go behind them, I don't see how you could possibly learn that on your own. But for the vast majority of people that are out there, we are taking on a tremendous amount of debt, myself included, as far as what my child's going through, and there definitely needs to be a rationalization of that type of effort spending and what the returns are for those people. And so my daughter right now is looking at it. In industries. She's going to be working in special ed and working with child development. So I'm pretty comfortable with that. I don't suspect there will be a robot that will be able to take a child with special needs today and calm them down and be able to work with them in an occupational therapy perspective to be able to help them. So I think for her, and that is something that's very specialized. I apologize if you can hear my
No
daughter.
worries.
Um, so that's something I think is fairly secure. She's not going to make a lot of money doing it, let's be honest. Right? But it's something she's passionate about and I think is resistant to technology. At the same time, I was actually in a networking event with an individual. We went around the virtual space and introduced ourselves and stated what we did for work, and she had mentioned that she does corporate headshots, and I kind of just tilted my head and went, that is an industry that's going to be eliminated. I mean,
Right.
my headshot that I have is completely AI generated. It looks just like me. I spent $50. I can generate 1,000 more of those in every single scenario. I can take my beard off, my glasses off. That's something that I would have to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to do if I have to leave my home and go and sit in a studio and make sure I get my hair cut before I go, and so those are types of jobs that are absolutely going to be disrupted. We,
So, Jim, in other words, it's not a no-brainer. Can we say, would you agree if I said that it's not a no-brainer anymore? You
no,
graduate from high school, I have to go to college. Uh, you have to ask yourself what it is that you want to do
yeah,
and what it is that you want to become or
yep,
achieve, and
yep.
see if this education is going to take you there, right? But here's the problem. You know, I think colleges over the years, however they've done it, they've done a phenomenal job selling themselves. Right? To me, I see them as sales organizations in a nice way. You know, they tell you that, hey, you
Yeah,
need to come learn from me. So you have the sense of pride. And when I talk to students, you know, who are in college right now or wanting to go to college, I can see that, right? There's a sense of pride that, okay, I'm the first one to go to college,
right.
or I don't know, I'm doing a PhD on something.
Yeah.
Now, is do you genuinely see that part of uh, whatever the right word is, that go away, where people are going to disassociate pride from college education, or do you see that is going to kind of chug along, so people are going to continue to want to borrow money and go to college because of the very simple fact they can
Well,
hang
yeah,
something on their walls?
yeah. I mean, it is institutionalized, so I think it's going to be very hard to um, disrupt that. I think it's ripe for disruption. You say, hang something on your wall. You can get certifications, right? They can hang those. I have them right over here on the wall next to me. Those are the things I'm probably more proud of. I don't have my diploma on the wall, right? I hang those because those are the things that I feel I actually probably worked hardest to achieve. I often say this too. I graduated with a social studies education major from SUNY Albany, and worked in the education field for a number of years and didn't care for it, and struggled to find full-time employment, and then went back and invested money in a technical vocational training program. I worked harder in those 6 months probably than I did in my entire 4 years of college, and was able to recoup the cost of that. It was $17,000, and that was back in 2001, uh, within 2 years. Whereas if I had probably gone a traditional route, going back for a master's degree, I might be still paying that off. Who knows?
I know somebody I worked with not too long ago where he was a gentleman who was much older than I, and then he came very excited to work one day. I'm like, hey, I know you're in a good mood. What's happening, right? He goes, well, you know, my wife just paid off her college tuition. I thought he was kind of joking because, you know,
Yeah.
this she must have gone to college like well before I did. I was
Yeah.
like, no, seriously, why are you happy? He goes, no, Krish, that's the reason. She
Yep.
actually paid off. I was like, that I don't know.
It's
I
nuts.
was happy for him, but I was not happy for society in general, because if you have to be that much older before you paid off your tuition, then there's other bigger fish that we have to
Yeah.
fry as society, for instance.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a like I said, I think there's a reckoning. A lot of the smaller schools have not been able to survive, for a lot of different reasons, but partly I don't think they were able to demonstrate the value. And there's been a litany of colleges, smaller colleges in upstate New York, that have just folded up. And I don't know what that necessarily means. I hope it just doesn't mean that the larger ones are just going to capture all of that and become analogous to monopolies that exist in other industries. But yeah, as a parent, as someone who works with other individuals in this industry, I do feel responsible for trying to bring some clarity to those folks, to say, make sure you're thinking about, like, again, we can't predict the future 100%, but think about what you're doing, what you intend to do, and try and find something that's technology proof, or somewhat recession proof. And if there's a alternative way to get to that end goal that doesn't necessarily require you to spend all that money, then by all means. My middle child chose not to go that route. He hasn't really figured out exactly what he wants to do yet, but in our school district has been very, very adamant. Every child needs to go to college, and my wife and I have said, you know, you need to figure out your own path, but if you're not ready for college, don't go to college.
Right.
Don't waste money that if you're not mature enough, if you don't know what you want to do, but you can support yourself in whatever capacity you can until you can figure out what it is you want to do. Fine. But don't just
People
go
are
to
going to,
college because someone told you had to.
you said it beautifully. If you are going to college only because someone told you that you had to, then you should live in India. People are going to be angry like, Krish, your knowledge is dated. It probably is. I moved here half my life ago.
Yeah,
But that's just culturally, that's what I grew up in, a world where
it's very
you're
much the
not even
American culture
asked whether
too.
you want to do
Yeah.
something, right? I mean, at least
Yep.
that's what it was in the past. I was in college for a lot longer than I needed to be.
Yep.
So, any questions? I have one non-technical question for you,
Yeah.
Jim, but
Yeah.
any
Go ahead.
questions you have for me before I ask that?
No, I'm just so as far as the way your company developed and how that got established, what do you see as potentially being disruptive to your business as it relates to AI?
Yeah, great question, right? The I'll give you two answers, right? The short answer is, if I find myself or anybody in my team solving a problem the same way that we would have solved that similar problem a year ago, I don't know what the right way is. I know that is the wrong way, right? It's the
Right.
simplest sin. Hey, you know what?
Yeah.
We would have approached this problem exactly the same way, like a 6 months or 12 months ago. And if we're doing it that way today, that's wrong, right? That's number one. Number two is the approach to, the two parts, right? The deliverable is one, whatever it is that you're building that goes to production. But the path that you take to building something to go to production has to be dramatically different as well.
Yep.
Whether you do wipe coding or not, whether you're writing good code or bad code and using AI to rewrite your bad code into good code, how do you do your PR reviews? What are you looking for in those reviews? All of those have to dramatically change. Plus, it's not just engineering and code development, right? Because I've seen when I talk to people, every time you talk AI, I feel like there's the sense of myopia because everyone's talking about writing code. I don't agree. I
Right.
think product management has to think differently. I think user experience and UI teams have to think differently. So everybody has to sort of wear that AI hat and do things ever so slightly or dramatically differently, because before
Hmm.
it comes to the development team telling Krish and team, Go build this," if they gave me the same thing that they'd have given me as an artifact or a deliverable from 12 months ago, then I think that team didn't do what they should have done as well as they could have done.
Sure.
And if we took that and built it the exact same way, then we are not doing it right. That's the second part of my answer. And the final part of my answer, Jim, is the choice of technologies is going to be more challenging going forward. We use AWS quite a bit,
Hmm.
and AWS is great, but it's one of those companies like, I don't think cloud, I mean, Google, cloud or Azure are any different necessarily.
Yep.
To solve a simple problem, they'll have a solution, and they'll have another solution, and they would have acquired three other providers. So they'll have
Right.
three
Right.
other
Yep.
solutions. So
Yep.
they'll have like
Yep.
17 different ways of doing it.
Yeah.
And people end up picking the one that they are generally comfortable doing because they've done it in the past,
Yep.
completely agnostic to the fact that that is not the best way to solve this problem, and this team may not have the expertise in using that particular product or the service.
Right.
So
Yep.
you end up in an ecosystem with like so many different tools, and we are guilty as charged because our ecosystem has like 6 different languages.
Yep.
And if you ask me, is it because every single time we found the best language? I would want to say yes, but the honest answer would be sometimes we want to try that other language because we're excited about using that other language that we've
Sure.
not used. So
Yep.
the developer excitement ends up playing a role. So some of those haven't changed with our approach, but what has changed is we are very careful about picking something because we're a startup. You cannot prototype something on a
Yep.
technology,
Yep.
build it for 2 months or 6 weeks, and then decide that, hey, you know what, that's not it, let me do something else, because you wasted 6 weeks, and that's a long time. And
Yeah. A
it's
lot of
like
money
dog
too.
years or
Yeah.
startup years, or weeks is a long time, right?
Yep.
So we're very careful in picking technologies, which has been generally the case, nothing different. But we're trying to be even more careful because this is newer space for a lot of us too. Like, hey,
Yeah.
do I pick Postgres and use vectors on Postgres? Do I pick Mongo and use the vector support on Mongo? Or do I go with Pinecone or VV8, which are vector databases? Those are difficult decisions, and you're never sure. Even after you make them,
Oh yeah.
you're uncomfortable, you're queasy, and then till you build something that goes to production, you're never certain, right? Once it sees the light of day, then you at least feel like, you know what, like it or not, we got this working. It's in
Yep.
production. Somebody's using it, so we can sleep peacefully, right?
Yep.
I don't know if that makes sense, but that's the totality of how we are trying
Yeah,
to
no,
approach some of
absolutely.
these
Yeah, no,
problems.
and I
Yeah.
think that's a lot of what we're hearing in the AI space too is, well, what should I use? You know, and to a degree it matters, and I think a greater degree it doesn't matter. You know, it's really what you're comfortable with, what it fits well into your ecosystem, um, and making sure that it at least hits your core requirements. The technology is advancing so quickly. The big players at least are going to catch up to each other. If one doesn't offer one feature or capability today, it most likely will be there in the other product, you know, within the next 3-6 months. So don't get too restless. Don't jump from one thing to the other thing to the other thing.
No,
You
I
know,
couldn't agree
yeah,
more because, just one thing which is if you have a good engineer, they could use COBOL from 200 years ago and build you a
right.
great piece of software. And if you have a not so good engineer, you could give them TensorFlow and they could still create something that's pretty mediocre, right? So I think
Yep.
as much as bots are going to be just as prominent as we are, I don't know, maybe in a month, maybe in 2 months, I don't know, Optimus might show up. You have to believe Musk maybe outside the house already, but I think good engineering skills are good skills and passion are the few things that I don't believe are going to be replaced. If you're
Yeah,
committed to what you're doing and you're using the right
I
set of
agree.
tools, you
Yep.
might still be in good shape. The
Yep.
last thing I want to ask you is what is your favorite food? What's your comfort food? And if it's something that our audience is generally predominantly in the US and Europe, but some in Asia, but it's
Yeah.
something people want to understand, you may have to explain that. What is your favorite food?
Well, I'm a big foodie, so that's a really tough question.
You're gonna
But
have to pick one. The top
yeah,
top.
I've spent a little time in Spain. My daughter lived in Spain last year. Is actually moving back to Spain in a week. So I have a real soft spot in my heart for Spanish food. And if I had to pick something from the Spanish cuisine, you know, I love tapas, but you know, I'm probably a good seafood paella would be up there.
Wow, that sounds pretty cool. I have no idea what that is, but can you spell it, Jim?
Sure,
Just so
paella is Paella. So
okay.
paella, yeah, it's
Is
a rice dish that has saffron and spices and typically mussels and clams and sausage and chicken, usually peppers and tomatoes, and it's just delicious, delicious.
it sounds good. If you have somebody like me in your team, like a vegan, borderline vegetarian person,
Oh, you could make a good
oh
vegan
yeah,
paella. Oh
I've
yeah,
never, I've lived here most of my life. I've never gone to a restaurant and ordered something off the menu. When I go with people, they're like, "Oh my God, okay, Krish's turn now. It's going to take like 20 minutes before the order actually goes through." And then
right,
the rest of the team is like, "I'll pick 47, 46, 42." I'm like, "How do you pick 42 and let them do what they want to do?"
right, right.
This is amazing, Jim. Anything else as closing comments that you want to say?
No, yeah, I mean, if people are interested in learning more about ProArch or myself, I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. I am confident I am the only James Spignardo on LinkedIn, as I think I'm the only James Spignardo in the universe. I put out a newsletter called Control Alt Innovate, and you know, I'm actually going to be starting a co-pilot in AI user group in upstate New York in November. So if you're in that area and you're interested, our first one is going to be virtual, but you'll probably see announcements through my company ProArch as well as through my own posts on LinkedIn. But yeah, that's where people can find me, and I just love having conversations with folks in the community. I just find it's an incredibly exciting time to be in technology, and I'm trying to soak up all the knowledge I can from the folks that I interact with and encounter. So
Lovely. Right. So again, thank you so much for your time. And I'm going we'll include the links to your LinkedIn profile and
sure,
ProArch. But if there's other links you would like for us to include, we're happy to do it. Just let us
okay,
know. Again, folks,
appreciate it.
thanks to Jim. We spoke to Jim Spignardo, who's the director of cloud strategy and AI enablement at ProArch. Jim, Thank you for sharing all of your thoughts, learnings, and experiences in this space and beyond. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Krish. Appreciate it.
Same here.